Hello and welcome to another Compass meeting between myself, Simon Hayes, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and Andy Marsh, the Chief Constable for the Constabulary. Today we're going to be talking about two issues primarily and briefly, which is the Drink Drive campaign ran over Christmas last year, and also the domestic abuse, domestic violence campaign run over at the same time. But the main part of the meeting will be to talk about force reorganisation and the plans for the Constabulary working in partnership with other agencies throughout next year and into the future. So, Chief Constable, hello.
Good afternoon.
Could we start with the domestic abuse campaign that was ran over the New Year period last year? It was a multi-agency programme that operated from Christmas Eve through to 1st of January. How do you feel it went from a constabulary point of view?
It's very difficult to measure just how successful a campaign like that has been. So one of the indicators would be the level of reported crime, and we recorded just under 400 crimes between the 22nd of December and the end of the month. It peaked on New Year's Eve, domestic abuse, and that was just under the amount that we recorded last year. But what we know is there almost certainly is still an awful lot of unreported domestic abuse out there. So that was just one indicator. We had a good deal of feedback from people who received the service, victims of domestic abuse, who were very positive, not only about the response they received from the police, which was professional and timely, from people who were interested and well informed about the sort of offending they were dealing with, but we also had positive feedback in terms of how well their problems and issues had been addressed in partnership with other agencies. So I think it was a useful exercise.
Yes, the working in partnership with other agencies is important, and we'll come on to talk about that in more detail later on. We work with Aurora New Dawn. It cost £5,000, I think, for the project. Do you think it was money well spent?
Well, what we know is, and what I'm absolutely sure of, is that we won't solve the problem of domestic abuse as a single agency working alone. It's often a really difficult issue that's been occurring over many months, indeed possibly years, and is often very late to be reported to us. So we can't possibly solve domestic abuse with a criminal justice intervention alone. And what other partners, such as Aurora New Dawn, offer is the ability to support and advise people who are suffering from domestic abuse in other ways of how to deal with it. So I think it was money well spent.
It's a major part of our police and crime plan to prevent offending in the first place and to prevent reoffending. And of course domestic violence, domestic abuse comes into that. Do you think it's something that the Constabulary could do on a more regular basis rather than just campaigning over periods in the year where we expect, and historically statistics show, that there's an increase in that crime?
One of the reasons, as you allude to, why we would tend to run a campaign such as this around Christmas is that families come together for a longer period of time. Actually, people can drink. There can be other risk factors that would tend to precipitate domestic abuse. So it is a peak period. And as I said, the level of reported domestic abuse on New Year's Eve was very high. Now, ideally, we'd be able to offer sophisticated services that were integrated with other partners and the voluntary sector all year round. But it is actually a cost issue. So it's something that I think we would look to extend. But it just does depend how much we're able to spend with partners on providing this response.
I was interested because we had a multi-agency conference in October to raise awareness and to talk with partners around the issues and challenges of dealing with domestic violence. And one point came up during that male victims were reluctant to come forward and indeed often didn't at all. In the statistics I think we've had from the campaign we're talking about, there was a slight rise in the number of male victims, so males who came forward to report. So I think perhaps we need to look at that in the coming months. And also I think on New Year's Eve the data showed that there was a fall generally in domestic crimes by almost a third. So the work that was done, both in the making awareness of it, I think, leading up to it, and the work that the force did in partnership over that period, is anecdotally, I think, showing signs of of reducing victims of that crime.
Yeah, indeed. There was a spike on New Year's Eve of domestic abuse crimes and incidents. However, that was a notable reduction from the previous year.
Yeah.
And I think a number of reasons for that, but hopefully our response would be one of them.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about the Drink Drive campaign, which again we mentioned at our last campus meeting, and the campaign featured Evie Staley, a 10-year-old girl who lost her life as a result of a car accident, a car driven by a drunk driver on the Isle of Wight. The campaign was courageously supported by Evie's family and was hugely impactful, I think. It was a joint campaign with Thames Valley Police, with the Roads Policing Unit, and it included some new features, I think. The anonymous texting, so giving the opportunity for the public to text in and say where, if they felt someone was likely to get behind the wheel of a car under the influence. The stats that I've had show that there was quite an increase, well, quite a difference really, across Hampshire and the island. A large number of arrests in Andover, for some reason, and a considerable reduction by about a third on the Isle of Wight. Do you think there's a reason, a policing reason, why there should be such a discrepancy in two parts of the counties in that way?
I would want to pay tribute to Neil and Penny Staley, Evie's parents, who actually were very courageous in putting together a number of YouTube clips, which are still on YouTube, and received over 20,000 hits. And the volume of hits that attracted is greater than many very expensive, sophisticated, professionally delivered campaigns. So actually I think it was a very, very strong campaign, in no small part due to the courage of Neil and Penny. I think it absolutely captured the imagination of people on the Isle of Wight because it is so close to home. So the Staley family will have touched the lives of many on the Isle of Wight through schools and other networks, and actually also will have touched the officers. So I think there was a very heightened awareness on both sides around how antisocial and dangerous drug driving is, and actually for the police in terms of responding. We did well from the text number, so 80999 is still a number that can be used. And actually one of the pleasing things that we saw was a fall in the proportion of positive tests, small but significant, perhaps most notably of collisions. So 10% fewer tests after a collision were positive. So hopefully we are changing driver behaviour, which is the ambition here. It's not to catch people per se, albeit there must be that fear of getting caught if indeed we're to deter people in part. So your question in part was why was it different in different areas? And I think it absolutely caught the imagination on the Isle of Wight. But also there will be different responses from different parts of the constabulary in terms of some of the enforcement activity that was going on. So what we will do is completely debrief the campaign, completely debrief the operational aspects of the Drink Drive campaign. We will keep our foot on this all year round because actually it destroys and damages lives, drink driving, and we'll learn the lessons and make it even better next time round.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of keeping your foot on it, are you extending the campaign into the rest of the year for a period of time, or do you mean that the approach to drink driving and substance misuse will be different?
We are actually a very progressive force around substance misuse. So we've developed a test which has been adopted nationally around assessing whether there are grounds to believe they're under the influence of drugs. We will continue to enforce and work with the public to catch people who are daft enough to drink drive throughout the year. We will have a summer campaign, absolutely, and with the support of Neil and Penny Staley, we will actually look to use the very powerful and upsetting story again.
We've had some questions from members of my youth commission around this. There was a member of the youth commission who saw the Purple Ribbon campaign. That was the ribbon that was used on Twitter. So this was the use of social media. And the question is, how well do you think engaging people through social media, like Facebook and Twitter, worked with the Purple Ribbon campaign, and did this work well enough for you to think about replicating it for other campaigns? So I think the question she's asking is the use of social media to advertise campaigns and to have a two-way discussion with young people particularly, perhaps, but not exclusively.
I mean, we certainly think that social media has got a place in terms of working with people and communities and touching people in a positive way. And I'm absolutely confident through the YouTube clip hits that we monitored and through the use of Twitter that this was a very well received campaign. And absolutely we can do more. And absolutely we do want to use social media in a number of different policing activities. So for example, we will often now pass information out on vulnerable missing people, and Twitter has helped us locate them, Twitter and Facebook. So actually it's got uses, and I think we are around the sort of tip of the iceberg in terms of how extensively we could use it. So I mean, it might be an issue for the youth panel who advise you. They've probably got some better ideas than me about how we could use it.
Well, they are suggesting that we actually target university students more specifically around issues and campaigns, on a more regular basis. But I think there's some work to do there, and they can develop that with them in the months to come.
Just on the target audience around drink driving, our experience has tended to be that university students are not, they don't make up a significant part of the at-risk or offending cohort. So whilst we certainly weren't ignoring them, the campaign wasn't specifically directed at them. But I'm certainly pleased that they've picked it up.
No, they're interested in it. Thank you. We'll move on now to the main part of our discussion, which really centres around the future of policing across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Speaking to residents, meetings I do, there's huge concern around the large sum of money that the constabulary is having to reduce its budget by as a result of government cuts. So £25 million over the next 2 years, and that's on top of £55 million over the previous 4 years. So what I'd like to talk to you about is what the future shape of policing is going to look like across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and how you and the constabulary will protect people and places into the future. I'm keen that the force is positioned to give a quality policing service that is seen to be value for money, that remains in the bottom quartile of cost to the public, but also maintains its place at the top quartile in terms of delivery, and that seek assurance that you can deliver what really matters to communities. So this is around neighbourhood policing, around ensuring partnership working that we touched on a little earlier, that it's a robust organisation that is able to fight serious organised crime and protect our communities, while maintaining modern thinking in the use of IT to deliver. And also importantly, which is a concern, is that there remains a culture of absolute integrity in all that the constabulary does. So I know there's been some work, and there currently is work going on, which is called the Operational Change Programme. Can you just explain to me how this is evolving in terms of your methodology to work out a direction for the constabulary and a sort of timeline as to when your processes will be complete?
Okay, I think it's really important for anyone listening to this to understand the context of where we've been and why we're there. So I've been within Hampshire Constabulary for almost 4 years now, and actually we're currently in a change period between 2010 and 2015, where, as you said, we will have reduced the overall budget in real terms by £55 million. Because actually, I'm sure that the public that speak to you would say some similar things to me, that actually don't cut our frontline numbers, protect them. So actually, in dealing with that first cohort of change, what we did was lean down as much of the back office as we could, and in some areas, such as finance, for the constabulary, and obviously we need people to manage our money, we cut the amount of money that we spend in that area by over 50%. In other areas which aren't necessarily visibly facing, but they do a really important job, like intelligence, we saved £3.5 million. In other areas, such as roads policing and armed response policing, we partnered with Thames Valley to provide those services, to provide greater resilience, but still all of the range of professional competencies, and saved in Hampshire well over £2 million. We're just entering another phase now where we're looking to partner with Hampshire County Council and Hampshire Fire and Rescue to take even more savings out the back office. So those savings to date have meant an overall reduction, as we sit here now, of around about 980 fewer people, police officers and police staff, working in the constabulary. So I think what I would want people to understand, and it's in answer to your question, is that any further savings on top of that are going to be really tricky in terms of where we take the money out of, because we put 81% of our budget into employing people. Policing is delivered by people. So in explaining the timeline, which was the question that you asked me, I've taken a few things into account which we will build the constabulary around. We will absolutely build the constabulary around delivering your policing priorities, what you stand for around protecting people from crime and harm, reducing reoffending and managing offenders, using the best technology, the things that you said, actually, how are you going to do this? The refreshed organisation will do that. The timeline that we're working to is that we've held a huge number of workshops. We've consulted personally over 500 staff, and we're coming up with some detailed plans which will give you a series of options, and I'll be meeting with my senior team to discuss what those options look like finally. Clearly the thinking is quite well progressed, what they look like next Monday. And my plan is then to come to you on Monday afternoon and give you the big picture, so that you can actually give me some direction and guidance about the bits which you want more of, less of, or done differently.
Yeah, I think that in that case it's important to for me to establish some lines in the sand, if you like, in terms of how this looks. Just thinking of neighbourhood policing, the continuation of safer neighbourhood teams is critically important to the public, and so is the link between communities and the police. So I'm thinking community being a district, a borough council, a city council, or the two counties that we've got. Can you assure me that there will still be a senior officer in command in each of those district areas, if I can call them that? So the critical link between the police and the public will be there, and not somebody at the centre overseeing neighbourhood policing.
Yeah, you've been really clear with me around what you think works based on what the public have told you, and actually what we will build into our refreshed model is a senior accountable figure in every district of the force. Now, for the cities, that's more likely to be a superintendent. For the other areas, it's more likely to be a chief inspector. And actually, those people will be the locally accountable figure for delivering all policing services. So I will expect them to know and get to know and serve their communities, to have feet in those communities. And actually, it's more than just visible presence and accountability. We certainly realise, taking policing forward, that if we're to be successful at what we want to be the best in the world at, we need to make space for the police officers and police staff to do that, to undertake those tasks. So we need to work in partnership to manage demand. Demand presents itself in lots of complicated ways, but actually we think that we can better serve the public to solve problems, and through solving problems, reducing demand, working in partnership. So the proposals that I'll bring you will underline local partnerships through this local leadership that you've told me is so important.
So can I push you a bit more on that? Because what is also of concern is that senior officers, chief inspectors, superintendent level, chief superintendent, will come and go quite frequently from a district or local authority command. Can we look for some sort of permanence for a period of time 2 or 3 years, so that the individual can get to know the role, that the local people, the local authority can get to know the individual, and partnership working can happen and evolve around that. Is that a commitment that you could give me?
I think you're right to express that concern on behalf of the public and partners, and actually I get a lot of reassurance from the fact that our public want to get to know their local police officers, community support officers, and our partners want to get to know them. And actually I understand why they're frustrated when they move on, when they just feel as though they're getting to know them and getting to do some good stuff together. There's been quite a lot of movement recently because of the changes in structure that we've been making. I hope to give you a policing model that not only will deliver your plan, but actually will be able to flex in accordance with budget as it might move in the future, which hopefully will minimise the likelihood and need for further disruptions. So actually I think my chance of making people stick in places longer has rapidly improved because of the model that we've designed. Now, what I would like to do is enter into an agreement that my expectation is that people in those key roles will serve for 2 or 3 years. I think there will be personal circumstances on occasions where people would need to move on. But certainly what I would undertake to do is to discuss those movements with you in advance so that you could help me manage them.
I think that helps. That helps give reassurance, as I say, to the communities. Just moving on a little bit from that and thinking about the concept of safer neighbourhood teams, and again the community getting to know who those officers are, police officers or PCSOs. The issue that I'm picking up is what we call abstractions. So neighbourhood teams are expected to work in one place, but then are taken away, so abstracted from there. So a community will find itself slightly denuded of a policing presence. I'd be keen that this new model actually addresses that and has a commitment within it that the high level of abstractions, which I think is close on 45-50% sometimes, is something of the past, and so that there is continuity, reassurance to the community that their safer neighbourhood teams officers will be there for that community. Obviously there'll be times when exceptionally officers are needed in another part of the one or other of the counties, and that's your operational control. But the concept, the general understanding that the high level of abstractions that currently happens will be addressed favourably will be something that I would seek in the final document.
What my team have strived to create in building some proposals for you to consider is to build a model that is sustainable, that actually works for the public and delivers on their expectations in your plan, but is also sustainable from the people who work for me and work with me's point of view. And I've gone on record before to say that I think they're stretched to the limit on occasions, and I think they've managed to help make a system work because of their sheer dedication to the vocation that is policing. And actually I wouldn't want the public to think they're abstracted to do anything other than police work. So they've been abstracted to support a model which is creaking and groaning under the demands of the savings that we've made with the expectations we've set it. I think what the change programme gives us the opportunity to do is rebalance this in a way that is sustainable for the public, and for the people that work for me. Now you're dead right, abstractions in some areas have knocked on about 40%, and actually that's disappointing for the public who feel they're being shortchanged from the officers who are working in their communities. The new proposals around safer neighbourhood policing, which I think have genuinely revolutionised policing in the last 10 years, really made a difference with the role of police community support officers, actually will massively reduce the abstractions. Now, as you say, we can never put a ring fence completely around police officers, because if there's an emergency, they clearly will need to deal with it. But what we won't be doing is routinely abstracting the police officers to backfill response teams. And what we won't be doing, if at all, is moving police community support officers out of the areas that they police. We really can put a ring fence around them. I think that's one of the values of that role. So I think the public will notice a better, stronger, safer neighbourhood presence in their areas as a result of this change. And certainly when I'm talking to other police chiefs around the country about what they're doing, I think we will be left with a very, very capable safe and neighbourhood team presence by comparison to some other areas.
Yeah, I think talking to police and crime commissioners nationally as well, not all of them have this commitment to safer neighbourhood teams as clearly you and I do. I'm also committed, and do you have any difficulty with this, to maintaining the numbers of PCSOs that we have at 334? It is a budgetary commitment, but I think they are well received within the community and also assist police constables in their office. Any difficulty with that commitment?
Certainly, people are concerned about numbers. What I would say is that this new organisation model will give them better local policing services. And actually, there will be a number of choices, but it is absolutely possible to protect the number of PCSOs if you look at our plans next week and say that's what I want to do. I agree with you. I think they've been a significant part of the revolution around better safer neighbourhood team policing. So that's certainly something that we can do.
So part of my strategy and early on was to review the estates strategy for the constabulary, so where our buildings were and where we want them to be into the future, and also building some new facilities, and to have it as a strategy that is in effect cost neutral. So it's put in place and it doesn't cost the public any extra money. As you know, the strategy did cost £83 million. I'm now proposing a strategy that costs slightly less than £40 million. There will be some sales of buildings, but there'll also be moving into new premises so that police officers are in the heart of the community or in a place within the community that the public can go and do business with the constabulary in the way that's not now necessarily possible. This change to move into sharing property, sharing buildings with perhaps local authorities or with the fire service, which we're beginning to do, is this something that you are content with in terms of fitting into the operational model of policing, or is this going to disrupt the ability of your officers to actually deliver neighbourhood policing in a way that we want them to do?
Well, obviously, I guess people watching this might wonder how some of the estate stuff works, but to be clear on this, the head of estates works directly for you, which is a significant change. And actually, I've got to say that over the last 12 months, some quite exciting things have started to happen around where we work from. So I was at New Milton last week, and I went to a beat office, which some response officers and the local Safer Neighbourhood team share with the local authority. And what a fantastic premises in the heart of the community at much less cost and in a way that helps us work better with our partners. So I think that's excellent, and we're pursuing similar arrangements in Rushmore. We're working with the fire service in Stockbridge, and this is part of the strategy which will help us keep our Safer Neighbourhood teams in the heart of the communities they serve and do better partnerships. So I'm really excited about it, and I think it will save the public more money and get better use out of public assets. But every day, more exciting things are happening. So one of my screensaver shots that I noticed when I was in a meeting today working was saying that our uniform stores has moved out of what was an expensive old leased building into a shared property with Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service. So actually I'm really satisfied that the operational requirement that I'm giving your team to say, actually, if you want us to deliver these policing services, this is the sort of basis you've got to give us in these areas. I'm really satisfied that that's showing some good early results. I think we've got some difficult tests ahead of us. We've got an ageing and inappropriate custody range of buildings that we use for detaining people in the course of investigations. But I know that your team have got some good plans. That's going to be tricky. And I do also know that we need to relocate from what is a very expensive to run headquarters. So, but the early signs are showing that the thaw is melting, and we're making some real progress around estates where I know the constabulary have struggled on that over many years.
It's been important to me to take that responsibility and worry, if that's the right adjective, away from you of the running of the estates, to free you and police officers up to actually do the policing bit. But it's important that we keep obviously in touch and an understanding, and that my office delivers the buildings that you need. You mentioned custody and the 2 new builds, Portsmouth we're talking about, and close to Basingstoke. And I gather that we're moving ever increasingly closer to identifying two sites for that, which is hugely exciting. I think I want to talk now a little bit around working in partnership to deliver the plan. So, who or what do we mean by partners? I suppose, strictly speaking, it's anybody that we would we want to do business with. But I think it is local authorities. It is safer community safety partnerships across Hampshire, which works well, and increasingly so with the revamped partnership on the Isle of Wight. I think there's some really good work being done over there by Laura Franklin, my assistant on the island. We talked about Aurora New Dawn as an example of partnership working. And currently, as we sit here, there are challenges in Hamble Village, in Hampshire from the flooding, and the neighbourhood teams there have been working very closely with Hampshire County Council, which is a relationship that I think we need to and can develop in many ways. But I want to ask about the integrated offender management scheme, and how you find that as a constabulary functioning in order to prevent reoffending and offending in the first place.
You point to a lot of partnerships, and actually you're absolutely right. We can't solve some of the most wicked issues in society: drugs and alcohol misuse, domestic abuse, child abuse, vulnerability. We can't do those things without working with the public, who are probably our closest partners, who we absolutely rely on, and the other statutory and voluntary agencies. And actually there's a lot of great partnership out there, but we can always do better. And actually I think our proposed structure, which puts a senior officer, which will be a chief inspector or above, at the heart of every district, coterminous with local authorities, I think that is going to be a great help. I think we'll be welcome. You specifically talked about integrated offender management, and certainly it's something that I've experienced in my career in policing, that unless very carefully managed, a small cohort of people will let their offending behaviour run out of control, and they will cause absolute misery in society, absolute misery. So tens of burglaries, number of robberies, car crimes, acquisitive crime, violence every single day, until someone stops to intervene them. So a significant part of the constabulary's mission is to actually create an environment in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight which is hostile to those people in terms of bringing them to book to account for their offences. Now actually I think we're good at that. We are very good at identifying those people and catching them before they commit further harm. But that's only part of the story, and something which certainly features large in your plan, which we've built into the new structure, a way of doing better, is how do we work those individuals in the future with other agencies to manage and reduce their reoffending. Now actually there are lots of partners out there that can help them reduce their reoffending. Some of the ways in which they can be helped are coercive, so they have to comply by court order, and some of them are voluntary. Now it's always better if people volunteer, but actually we will have a capability in our restructured force to focus on those individuals both pre them coming through the judicial system and post. And I certainly think that integrated offender management, as it's known, and it's integrated because it integrates between different agencies working with them, is a really, really significant way in which we will reduce crime in the long term.
And I think to develop the concept of social change, which is what the plan is all about, the police can't do that alone. And I think also that there's not a great understanding that the police should have wider responsibilities beyond just catching the criminal. And I've had many discussions at public meetings over this. But I think the use of the police as the lead organisation in trying to bring around social change, in trying to reduce the demand for policing, trying to prevent reoffending, is critically important. I have been criticised a little bit for my agenda, and I can understand this as being slightly soft, talking about working with people, talking about restorative justice at the lower end of criminality. But it is, there are opportunities to address the serious and organised criminality, the harder end of crime, if you like. And I want to talk to you about Operation Fortress specifically, which functions in Southampton, is a unit that's been running for almost 2 years now to combat serious drug activity, primarily but not exclusively in Hampshire. I'm keen that it should be kept and expanded and not closed or come to an end of its term when the funding comes to an end in the next financial year. So I'm minded to invest another £1.8 million in extending its operational life and developing it slightly beyond the geographic boundaries of Southampton. Now, how do you feel about that in terms of its effectiveness as an operation, the way that it's dealt with drug criminality, and we know from the media that it's had successes in recent months? Is Operation Fortress a good investment for Hampshire Constabulary to protect people and places?
When we set up Operation Fortress, it was based on a concern that organised drugs gangs, organised criminals, would get a foothold in our force, and regardless of the very serious crime that those individuals cause, what they certainly bring beneath them in the shape of a pyramid is a whole wedge of other crime and antisocial behaviour misery that relates to people stealing and engaging in criminality, sometimes with violence, in order to feed those habits. And there are individuals who have serious addiction problems that would need to steal an awful lot of property to feed those habits. So in the duration of Fortress, we've made well over 300 arrests. People subject of those arrests, and many of them are yet to go through the process, have been sentenced to over 150 years in prison. So it's got a really sharp edge, absolutely. Some really serious offending in that as well. One individual arrested a drug dealer with an AK-47 and ammunition, was sentenced to 11 years. Now, I would want to reassure the public that actually this is really very rare, but I want to make it even rarer under your plan. And we have been very successful, I would say, through Fortress. But it's not only about the sharp end. We have also worked with other partners, and the City Council in Southampton have been great to work with young people to make sure that role models around violence and drugs are shown not to be successful. So it's been successful. I mean, in terms of facts and figures, I've given you a few. Drugs-related violence, and we can identify when violence is drugs-related pretty accurately, has fallen by over 60% during the period of this scheme. Intelligence relating to drugs-related violence, which is actually more, there's more than gets reported, I know that, obviously I'd like to narrow that gap, has fallen by over 50%. Now that's at a time when we've invested much more through Fortress in gathering intelligence about drugs-related violence. So I'm really sure that something significant has happened around making Southampton a very hostile place for people to deal in drugs at that serious level, and actually has worked very carefully with the community to actually make it unacceptable and help young people make the right choices. I think it would be a really useful thing to carry on. It isn't something that I would have chosen to wind up or integrate within the wider organisation for any reason other than a shortage of funding. So if you are able to make £1.8 million available to continue its work, indeed expand it beyond Southampton, I think that would be a very good thing for the communities of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight.
So how, when we talk about expanding beyond Southampton, what does that mean from an operational point of view? Does that mean setting up another unit somewhere else? Does that mean taking more interest in drug-related criminality in other parts of the two counties? What is the difference, if you like, between what's being done now and what expanding it would mean?
What that money would buy you as a commissioner would be the team of the continued activities and work of approximately 30 people that work across the range of activities that I've suggested, from covert investigations and enforcement through to partnership working. And actually the way that, so it would continue those people in addition to all of the other work of the constabulary, so it would be value added and additional. And actually what I would propose to do would be to break down any boundaries within which we task them. So in terms of investigations, they could and would be tasked to other areas of, we call it threat, risk and harm, where that criminal activity is insurgent into our area. And quite often these people that are dealing are coming in from outside. And the other area which we would propose to extend it would be some of the partnership activity, particularly around schools, families and young people, which has been so well received in Southampton, to look to see how that team could extend that learning in person or through Safer Neighbourhood and other teams into the communities that they serve. So partly it's about their activity, partly it's about their skills, knowledge and influence.
So going back to what we were talking about, the value of neighbourhood policing, that actually would also inform some of the work from intelligence gathering, possibly, for the Operation Fortress team at the centre. Yeah,
I mean, contrary to what some people may think, Safer Neighbourhood teams are actually the sharp edge of the start of enforcement against serious and organised crime. So actually they'll be the first people to notice if those sorts of criminals are active in their area. And that works in rural areas. It is organised crime to steal and export plant, for example, or to engage in any organised criminal activity. So Safer Neighbourhood teams have got a really important part to play in a whole range of strategies, but not least of which serious and organised crime work.
Can we move on to talk about the use of information technology? We might touch on body-worn videos in a moment, but under this new structure where we have Safer Neighbourhood teams in communities, what's referred to as the targeted patrol team, so the 999 response teams, the public might be more familiar with seeing them. How do they fit into your new model from the point of view of command and control, being tasked to jobs in geographic areas?
Yeah, the targeted response teams, the public probably know them as the people who would respond to the 999 calls. They're on duty 24/7 and they would respond to different grades of job. So a 999 call is an immediate response, we call that grade 1, and a grade 2 is a priority job which I need to get to very, very quickly. We need to fulfil that responsibility to be there when the public need us. So actually the new model of policing which we're creating has got a number of options about how we manage and lead those individuals. They need to be led by people who are there 24/7 at an appropriate rank. They need to feel part of a team. They need to be in teams that are resilient. They need to be properly equipped and supported. So within the change programme, we are looking at a number of options about how and where those individuals work and are brigaded. And there are some quite tight options and there are some quite loose options. And what I need to do is provide a solution that does what the public need, i.e. they're there in an emergency when you need them, but actually organises in a way that is acceptable to my staff. So it wouldn't be acceptable for them to be driving tens and tens of miles to a work and then drive back to where they came from to go and do their duty. So we've got some difficult choices to make, but I'm confident that we can achieve that balance.
So the public won't see rows of police cars necessarily parked in a police station, as can currently be the case. They'll be more out on the open road, but out in the community, ready to respond quickly and efficiently to any jobs that come up.
I mean, success in terms of targeted response teams looks like well-led, highly motivated individuals that are there when you need them to be there, and actually when they're not dealing with those high priority and urgent jobs, are actually deployed into what we call proactive patrol. They're looking for criminals, they're in areas which have been experiencing problems and working with their Safer Neighbourhood teams to solve those problems. So actually in one respect, the public hopefully won't notice any difference about this. Now, in terms of equipment, especially technology, it's my aim, and I'm confident that we're beginning to do this, to give those officers everything they need to go out and patrol and stay out and patrol, so that they don't have to come back to the police station to fulfil their reports. So, for example, and this is one area which we're making progress more than any other force in the country, since last April, officers in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight have taken over 30,000 electronic witness statements, where the witnesses have signed a computer pad and the statement's been done there on the spot. It hasn't been written by hand, it hasn't had to be typed and then taken back for a signature. So that's just one example of how we're giving officers equipment to do their job better in the community. And under a grant from the Home Office, it's called the Innovation Fund, which you made probably about 3 weeks ago now. The Constabulary was awarded about £400,000 to roll out more tablets of what we call mobile data that will do just this even better. So a newer generation of mobile technology.
So just as a final topic, we've talked about crime generally, we've talked about Southampton and Portsmouth. Just want to ask you about rural crime and the new rural crime strategy, which has identified what areas of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight are rural. The strategy is beginning to come into place. I think it's critically important that this was reviewed, and the training around or for officers and PCSOs working in rural communities. Can you say a little bit about how you feel that will unfold, and again what success will look like in terms of reassurance to the public who live and work indeed in rural communities?
Okay. Before I did that, I didn't know at any stage whether you wanted to pick up on the body-worn video question. But on the issue of rural crime, you're right in direct response to your plan. We have identified which areas of the force, the constabulary, are rural beats. And we've heard loud and clear through you that the public want and expect an equitable and fair service from their local police force. Actually, we've worked hand in hand with the public through independent advisory groups and stakeholder groups, and we've already made a lot of changes. So we've got dedicated staff working on rural crime teams actually out there in the community across the force, alongside and within safer neighbourhood teams. And actually, under the parameters that you've given me, I don't intend to reduce those teams at all through the change programme. Those teams have worked with members of the community that have put themselves forward to help us to deliver training, and we're still doing this, but training to every single frontline member of staff, including those in control rooms. So we're starting to see a lot of progress, and we've started to try and understand the needs and expectations of rural communities better. So we now segment our satisfaction data, and we survey a very significant number of victims of crime every single month for burglary, car crime, robbery. And actually the force is currently achieving the highest levels of satisfaction that we've ever experienced under that methodology. So 85% of people surveyed say they're completely satisfied, very satisfied, or satisfied with the service they've received from the police, which I think is really good. Now, the level of satisfaction in rural areas at the moment is just 1% below that. So we are almost on a parity in respect of satisfaction. But crime looks and feels different in rural areas. So I know that that's just one indicator. The job's not done, and we've got lots more to do. But we've certainly made a very good start to delivering your expectation of a rural crime strategy.
And it will be important to show that that you can reduce the reduction in solved crimes between the higher levels in the urban area and the not quite so successful resolutions in rural areas. So we'll keep an eye on that into the future.
That's certainly something that we're working hard to do. I think I would say in response that crime does look and feel different in the rural areas to the urban areas. So there are some things which make those investigations more difficult. So, for example, theft from vehicles in beauty spots is actually more tricky than a CCTV controlled urban environment. I think both of our ambitions would be to see less victims of crime actually, and we are making headroads into that. And we have made some progress in reducing the solved crime gap in urban and rural areas.
I was pleased to see the results of the court case recently of poachers who were not only fined but also had their dogs removed and rehoused, so that the courts in this instance are backing up the work of the police and the rural community to prevent crime and say, this is not acceptable.
Yeah, indeed, and actually we wouldn't have been able to pursue those cases of people poaching with dogs without the money you were able to set aside to house the dogs whilst the court case came about. So I think what wouldn't necessarily have harmed the people perpetrating those crimes would be the fines, although they were significant, but absolutely the loss of their dogs, who actually now, yes, have been rehomed. So if anyone's concerned about their welfare, they're actually in appropriate homes. But I think they will be very, very concerned that they can no longer use those dogs in the crime which they choose to undertake, and indeed I think in part they probably regard as a recreation. So we've managed to stop them doing that.
Before we move on to talk about rural crime, let's just pick up on what you said about body-worn videos. Hugely important for police officers to have that capability of being able to record what they see, what they witness, but also to be able to record how individuals behave towards police officers as well. You mentioned the Innovation Fund. I'm pleased that we'll be able to match fund that and have more body-worn videos available to police officers on the mainland. How do you feel the courts are going to respond to this as evidence?
We've managed to secure the Innovation Fund grant from the Home Office with your support, so we wouldn't be able to do it without the match funding you're putting in, and actually it set us on a path where every single uniform officer, apart from firearms officers, because they are a separate case, and I can explain why if you want to ask me about that, but every single frontline uniform officer will wear body-worn video, and I believe that we'll be the first police force nationally and probably actually in the Western world where all officers use those. And the question is how will the court receive them? I think that the body-worn video is going to be more than useful. Some will say essential, I'm sure, in the future in a number of ways. Quicker justice, fairer justice, and an independent witness. So quicker justice in that where we've already got 450 cameras in use in the force. We've already seen individuals who've been arrested make fuller and earlier admissions, especially in crimes such as domestic abuse, where I can give you an example. There was a man who was recorded and he was incredibly calm outside the house, incredibly rational. The officer went inside and the body-worn video then captured young children in an absolute state of distress, crying, a partner who had clearly been assaulted, and a house that was absolutely smashed up. Now that led that individual to make an early admission. In terms of the courts, I can give you an example of where the courts obviously, I believe, find the evidence helpful. It is an independent witness. But we had a case in a hospital where an officer had to take an individual who was being violent, and that individual was abusing the officer. He was threatening to kill him, threatening to kill his wife, his children, and you could see on the body-worn video, this was all captured on body-worn video, you could see patients in the background becoming incredibly distressed by what was going on. They were ill. They should be getting treated, not being exposed to this sort of behaviour. Now that individual was charged with a public order offence, Section 5 public order offence, of offensive behaviour. When the court saw it and the Crown Prosecution Service presented it to the court, it was agreed that it should in fact be a threatening behaviour as opposed to Section 4, a more serious offence. And the magistrates in sentencing the individual made specific reference to the video and said, because of what we've seen, because of the severity of it, because of the way that you've upset people in a place that should be safe, we're going to give you a harsher sentence. So incredibly well received. So quicker justice, fairer justice. But I think that we are only just seeing the start of what's going to be some very significant changes around policing and the criminal justice system. We've heard Damien Green talk about the system being fully digitalised by April 2016. I'm absolutely confident that we will be a foremost force in fully digitalising our criminal justice system. So we've got the witness statements electronically. We've got the files electronically. The officers have got that kit in the cars. You've signed an agreement to refresh the force with a new IT network, which will get that data around the force quickly. We've got the body-worn video cameras. And actually, I see a day when instead of any statement being taken at all, that actually a witness just gives an account on camera, which is presented to a court. And I see a day where an offender, for the right level of offending, actually would give an account of themselves on the body-worn video on the spot, and the whole lot is presented to magistrates and judges and juries to make an assessment of who's telling the truth and what sentence should be. Now, for that to take place, there will need to be some legislative changes. At the moment, I'm working to the College of Policing to create some guidance for all forces in how to use body-worn video cameras. So I hope, picking up your lead from your police and crime plan on the use of technology, to put Hampshire absolutely at the forefront of this technology for the public, to put them first and to do a good job for them.
Mm-hmm. I think what you described and what we've spoken of generally in this conversation is that we are together placing Hampshire Constabulary in a place where it can continue to deliver quality services in an innovative way to protect people and places across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and to address the issue that we spoke about earlier, which is the reduction in government grant. But we need to keep on top of it, and we'll continue to discuss the various items at future Compass meetings. But Chief Constable, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you found that an interesting discussion. Future Compass meetings will be notified on my website and eventually put on YouTube. I'd like to thank my team for setting up this afternoon, and for the media students and staff at Winchester University who have helped us with the production today. Thank you very much.